Hey there, friends. Dana here, otherwise known as Dana Spirit Butterfly. I wanted to do a video to support you if you are interested in a little bit more conversation around the Chinese New Year, why the Chinese New Year is important, and how the energetics work around this as a concept. Also, we want to talk a little bit about the Celtic Wheel of the Year and the energetics that are surrounding this particular phenomena, because it does impact this next lunar cycle. But first, let's go back to the Chinese New Year. And those of you who have heard, we have just left the Chinese New Year of the Wood Dragon, and we are now entering the Chinese New Year of the Wood Snake. And this happens on the first new moon of every year. This new moon is a new moon in Aquarius, which may or may not resonate with you, as we've shared, me and my spirit guidance system that comes through these videos to communicate to you. We are here as guides, as support structures, but also as agents to inspire you to cultivate an awareness of your own energetics. And when we use the term energetics, this is different to your DNA and your DNA potential. It is also including that. It actually also talks about your paradigms that you live, the contracts that perhaps you signed pre-birth in order to have the life experience that you're having now. The relational wisdom that moves through your energy system is actually a part of your energetics, and it is attracted to you and also repelled from you, i.e. you won't see it, or it'll disappear, or it'll hide, according to your own characteristics, personality, and also level of soul development. And when we talk about level of soul development, the level of soul development in a spiritual context does talk about more than just your physical body and your DNA and your meat suit, although a lot of people will use the term evolution to describe the process of us as independent beings with an identity, an ego, a name, if you will, a situation that we live in, and certain life experiences that we carry in our physical experiencing. Evolution is this term that we use that looks at how we accumulate awarenesses of ourselves and the power that we have to make choices and to act with agency to actually bring things or give birth to things in the world. And so looking at yourself in space and time as a snapshot is useful as a dialogue to be able to receive awareness of who you are and what power or potency you might have to impact the world, the greater consciousness. And whenever someone says to me, Dana, I really have this strong desire to be of service, it often talks about an evolutionary pathway where you, on an individual level, have a desire to use the power of your expression and the power of your voice and your knowledge base and your memories and your attributes and all the things you see as you, to use that in a way to apply those parts of you in a way to give back to the community, to contribute to others, to share your wealth and wisdom so that it is beneficial for more than just yourself. For some people, this looks like parenting, where you have a child and you are innately responsible to take care of that little baby's body, that little being who isn't yet fully voiced as an independent being, as an adult form, and is instead going through a developmental experience. But interestingly enough, from a soul's perspective, from a psyche's perspective, we are always that on some level, to some extent, depending on which aspect of self you're dialoguing with. A good example of this is if you are trying to learn a new skill. So, for example, at the moment, I'm taking singing lessons from someone who I deeply admire. Very excited about it. It's something I've been wanting to do for a very long time. And I, in my adult self, thought that I had a certain level of voice. But as I start to learn from someone who's a very, very good singer, very educated, has a lot of experience, as I learn from her, I start to notice that actually I feel like a child again. I feel like an adolescent, I feel like someone whose voice is cracking and can't hold a tune. And it's only because I've situated myself in a container of learning, in a container of development. And I've done that for the purposes of cultivating my voice. And so too will you have your things. The things are parts of you that you may be in an adult form, but ultimately there'll be skills and there'll be, maybe creative cultural parts of you that you wish to cultivate, or maybe you want to learn how to play the didgeridoo. I don't know, but either way, at some point your journey with that will take you to an awareness that actually you don't know much about the thing you're learning about. It's not an exercise of you proving how good you are just simply by trying it. It's actually an exercise in development. It's actually an exercise in taking potentially a talent and turning it into a skill, turning it into maybe a vocation. And so, training and the awareness of needing mentorship, guidance, needing some form of support, needing a parent, an adult, all of these words talk about the support structures that we all deeply desire to have in our lives so that we can journey with whatever it is that we're in development of, feeling like we actually have someone to ask questions about it and actually receive some answers that can inspire us to improve and to become more. And so, as I say that, why do we celebrate the Chinese New Year? Why is it slightly different to the Western civilization's idea of the Gregorian calendar and the New Year? It isn't different in a fashion, but what it does talk about is it talks about a different type of an alignment. And when we talk about a different type of alignment, Spirit is saying it's actually important for you to acknowledge who you are and what you represent as a soul embodied in this life. If you have no journey with that, then you're like a bear in a china shop. I'm sure that there's a different animal in there that usually an elephant in a china shop. You're like an elephant in a china shop, right? It's like you're not aware that actually there's all these fragile little bits and nuancy information and, women with sensitive bits who actually don't like to be yelled at because when you do shut her down, all of these types of dialogues, they're basically something that needs development. They're basically you needing opportunity and time to actually sit with a conscious, deliberate intention to learn about these things. And so when we're talking about learning, often you'll hear in my videos, we talk a lot about the balanced form, basically the balanced masculine, the balanced feminine, as opposed to maybe the adolescent masculine or the adolescent feminine or the toxic masculine or the toxic feminine. Now, I am using those words simply to anchor ideas, not necessarily to be wedded to them. There are simply comparative tools to assist you to understand how to map relativity in reference to things. So suffice it to say, if you're in a dialogue that denies that there is a need for some conversation and acknowledgement of masculine and feminine paradigms, you will stay in an adolescent form of awareness, not understanding the nature of relativity. Relativity, i.e., knowing where I stand in space and time, and that there are others in the world that they themselves have different maps and different systems and different orientations, that between us, there is a conversation that goes on that helps us to stretch and learn and develop and evolve. If you can't label some of these things, then you've got no potential to really truly evolve with a level of consciousness that is acknowledging of the wealth and the wisdom that we're actually surrounded by. So we're feminine and masculine, if we can say that the Gregorian calendar, that which maps our time-space continuum with, 1st of January, 31st of December being the end beginning of a year, that there are 364, sometimes 65 to align with, that fact that this is out of cycle with moons. If you want to just lean into that system, you're welcome to. This system is highly intelligent. It is useful to pinpoint certain truths and certain wisdoms. And off the back of that, there are certain energetics that flow in and between these ideas and these constructs. But the Chinese New Year in itself aligns with the moon cycles, not with the Gregorian calendar. And so it's always the first new moon of the Gregorian New Year that the Chinese New Year advocates or expresses. Probably a better word. Sorry, I'm channeling, so sometimes the words get a bit fuzzy. So the Chinese New Year is an acknowledgement of the lunar cycles. It's an acknowledgement of the 13 moons that happen regularly. It helps us to reconnect with some of the feminine dialogues and languages that we use. But in practice, when you acknowledge the masculine and feminine, that they're both dancing together and that they both have a relativity and that they both have an equally useful function, the energetics behind it means that you can do certain processes at the beginning of the year because there's a whole lot of people who are actually acknowledging that this is the end of the year and the beginning of the year. So a certain energetic presence is accepted by the majority of people on the planet at that time space continuum moment that allows us to harness the potential of that for our own developmental dialogue. With the Chinese New Year, there's actually a large proportion of individuals that accept the Chinese New Year as a valid point of celebration, very similar to the Gregorian calendar Western form of New Year's. So between the 1st of January and the first moon of the new year, there's a particular energetic window that allows us a bit of grace period energetically. Remember, we're talking about energetics, to be able to get a better sense of what we want our year to be about and perhaps get a clearer picture in our mind, which is a controller function that does actually allow us to see certain things, that is a necessary part of our intelligence that shouldn't be shamed or blamed. There is a reason why we have a controller part and why it is that we've used that controller part for our evolutionary development as a species. That part of us actually does need consideration, it needs conversation, and it does need some self-awareness. If we don't have these, the controller function starts to express out some of our emotional dialogues that we can't find purchase elsewhere with them, and it starts to play out punishment and reward system games, which can be very devastating for relationship paradigms. And, indeed, as a friend kind of said to me, those of us who were raised in the 80s, we kind of didn't really have parents, partially because of the way the paradigms were structured in terms of the old-fashioned way of parenting. And then suddenly the 80s brought in all this fast food and all of this super, kind of speedy, easeful, graceful, much easier to get things in front of children so that they can consume and digest. But what it meant is that a lot of us didn't really have the eldership role models that little developing children need in order to be able to find purchase in stable and supportive role modeling systems or archetypal ideas. Now, this is why it's so important for us, particularly of our generation, of my generation, who was raised in the 80s and the 90s, and also, moving on forwards, for us to have these developmental dialogues, for us to actually sit down in space and time and to see these energetic things as an opportunity to get a more richer picture in our minds as to our own complexities, that we're not just simply a man or a woman with a particular sexual orientation and either an intellect or a creative. The truth is that the human condition actually encompasses all of them. So if you identify as an intellect, I guarantee you've also got a creative aspect somewhere. If you're an artist or musician, I guarantee you there's a deeply intelligent wealth of wisdom at the level of your mind mapping system that you could apply to help you with your creative processes. These are still masculine and feminine dialogues. And if you kind of acknowledge that there are two poles at the end of a spectrum that all of humanity dances within in relativity, so me, looking outside my own independent lens to view the world, will automatically start some comparative dialogue of some kind in order to find orientation for myself, in order to know myself in space and time. I can't do this independent completely to the isolation of everybody. It helps to have relationships to reflect you. But, there are some relationships that are supportive. There are some relationships that are open and available for your greater voicing. And there are others that actually, through their absence of awareness of their controller function, the mind mapping system that basically will not learn about itself and instead sees the world as being the causal factors for their own experience and only that, such individuals don't typically develop very well. There's no space for the masculine and feminine dialogue to be together in harmonious resonance. And this will impact your ability to be in steady and safe relationships. And so with that, this is why we move into the conversation of the Chinese New Year versus the lunar, Western New Year, this period of time. January is nearly always a bit fuzzy. Also, partially because here, if we look at it from the Celtic system or the seasonal calendar, in Australia, we're moving through the summer period, and in the Northern Hemisphere, you're moving into the darkest part of winter. So, this period of time, you're either very outward facing and hyperactive in the external world, or you're deeply intrinsically introspective and being called to ask yourself deeper questions. So, this is an ideal period of time, collectively and individually, to start to do some of this mapping work. And so we ran the Becoming program. You can still access it if that's interesting to you. You can still technically do some of that work and that mapping. So I invite you, if you're curious about that, to please look into my Patreon work, which you can do so by visiting www.patreon.com/Dana Spirit Butterfly. And I have some information there that perhaps you want to dive into. And if you don't, also equally fine. I'm a big fan of independent spirituality, for you to know what works for you and what doesn't, and for you to dialogue with that. All I care about, and all Rose, or the Rose work that I offer cares about, is that you actually have a dialogue and that you're actually in your own, rather than living other people's lives, because that's not fun, and it's not in service to any of us to do that only. We need both. We need a bit of both. And if you don't know how to locate yourself in space and time and orientate yourself and know where you're at with your developmental structures with pure transparency, then you need to start a dialogue. And I have heaps of tools to help you do that. So please look into my work. So we just left the year of the Wood Dragon. The year of the Wood Dragon was a high vibrational, a high energy. A lot of energy moved fast. There was basically two timelines collectively that was there as a potentiality becoming really clear, much clearer. And this is the way I've always done things, and maybe I'll revert to this idea. And so for many of us, we danced a little bit, we stretched a little bit, we jumped into these higher timelines. We looked at how we could actually find a bigger voice for ourselves and actually be more obvious in the world. This is the dragon energy. For a lot of you, you weren't ready for the dragon energy to fully take advantage of that energy opportunity in order to be able to step fully into your voice. And that's okay, because we're all at different developmental levels. Just have to own where yours is. The new year is the year of the wood snake. And I'm a bit excited because I'm a snake in Chinese astrology. But, you know, you'll all have your own relational wisdom and your own relativity to what the snake energy represents for you. Typically, snakes are changeable. So they're known as transformation energies. So during this period of time, there is a space for all of us to start a new dialogue or to continue a new dialogue from last year. But this year, it's less about being focused and heading towards it, and more about allowing the stream consciousness that we live in and exist to weave its way towards the direction of what it is that we're ultimately desiring. And with this comes change. With this comes a few directions that seem like they're in the opposite of what it is that you actually want. And your responsibility is to keep orientating back to center. Now, we should be doing this anyway, as humans, as women, as individuals who are here for planetary healing, to support the greater consciousness, to move through us, to find a better seat of sense of belongingness to the world. The good part of this practice is just to own your truth, to know where you sit in space and time, and to keep orientating back to center, so that you can allow for the nuance, the diversity, the snake energy, to move in and through, heading towards a particular direction, but meandering, taking its time, noticing where there's space to move, and being restful when the energy feels a bit quieter. This is a process of deep listening. And if you want to learn how to do that a little bit more, I will direct your attention towards my Rose initiation process, which is specifically designed to train this in your energy system. And while Rose is typically associated with feminine language, she's also very open to working with men. So if you feel it, if you tune in and you look at that and go, okay, cool, I don't know what this is about, but, you know, it's a low cost payment, and, you know, just have a look, see if it resonates with you. I invite you. I'd love to share with you what is on that program, because it will benefit you in one way or another. I guarantee that. And so, you yeah, I invite you to do that. With that, I also just want to acknowledge that we've started the Claire's our psychic senses journey already. For this year. That started on the 26th of January. It's not too late to join that either. So if you jump onto the Patreon and you're like, yes, I'm really interested actually in seeing a little bit more about my psychic senses this year, then please check that out. It's not too late to join that group. We already have a lovely group of individuals who have signed up and have started the coursework already. And our first call gathering online together is not for another 2 weeks. So you've got up until then pretty much to sign up to the process, and it'll only take you about an hour and a half to do every week's work. So it's not a very long commitment heavy process. The long-term plan for that course actually is an invitation into an ongoing psychic development circle, which I want everybody to do on the planet, not necessarily mine, but to develop your psychic senses. I'd really love to see a world that's more accountable to energetics and more accountable to the sense feelings of things not being quite right, and maybe waiting for the feeling of a yes, waiting for a feeling of actually it's time now. When you do cultivate practices to be aware of those things, life gets much easier relationally. Your relationship with yourself, and also your relationship with your loved ones, past, present, and emerging. So with that, I'm going to sign this video up. I appreciate you tuning in. If you want to learn a little bit more about Imbolc, the upcoming basic Celtic celebrations that are coming up on the 2nd of February, give or take a couple of days because of just the way the seasonal calendar works, then yeah, please sign up to my Patreon. There's lots of information there, and I'd love you to receive some support and some guidance, and to learn how to bring more of this feminine landscape back into balance within your own energy system. And I don't care if you're a man or a woman or what you identify with. All I care is that you have a soul and a desire to develop, and that space will be for you. So with that, much love from Byron Bay, from the Northern Rivers, northern South Australia, New South Wales, sorry, where am I? And just also acknowledging I'm on Bunjong country. And I really love living here. I appreciate the energy that's here, and the spirit, the land spirits and the custodians. I will honor them with my awareness of them still being here, helping us to keep this space and time coherent with the ancestral storylines that have moved through this land grid for thousands of years, way beyond my ancestors living here. So with that, much love. Until our next time. See you soon, hopefully. Bye.